who is, well, I'll read from this. So Dr. Mehnaz Momen teaches political science and public administration at Texas A&M. She grew up in Dhaka and completed higher education in Halifax, Canada, and Cleveland, Ohio, which is really important because that figures in the book that she's writing about. The book is about how she was living in Dhaka and then left to go to Halifax, Canada. She's the author of The Paradox of Citizenship in American Politics from Palgrave 2017, and Political Satire, Postmodern Reality in the Trump Presidency, Who Are We Laughing At? From Lexington in 2019. She's working on another book on the border city of Laredo, where she lives, called Space, Memory, Identity in Laredo, Anatomy of a Border City. And this book that she's going to read from today is her memoir, Living Dhaka, Leaving Dhaka, by Jagriti Prakashani 2022, which recounts the story of growing up during the heyday of chaos and change in the aftermath of liberation. So Bangladesh liberation was in 1971. She treasures the secular, tolerant, and vibrant environment that nurtured her. This memoir is an attempt to exalt those days and preserve the narration for the generations which are distant from the way of life that once defined Dhaka. So introducing Mehnaz to read from her book.
Thank you. So, this is my first non-academic book, and it didn't start as a book. It started as something that, Anis was telling me to write. He wanted to know about my childhood, and I just started writing. I didn't foresee this becoming a book. But when I started writing, somehow I started remembering so many things. I didn't even know that, these memories were there. And I felt very strongly after I wrote about it, because I grew up in the Dhaka University campus, which was probably the most secular, most progressive part of Dhaka. But I also felt like very strongly that Dhaka doesn't exist anymore. The most tangible part is the loss of secularity perhaps, but there were a lot of other very interesting things that was happening, because right after the liberation there were so many, the country could go in many different directions. We were part of, because of our location, geopolitical location, at that time Soviet Union and America were kind of contending the soft power. So we grew up reading a lot of Russian books. Actually, I read probably as many Russian books as I have read Bengali books in my childhood. So there were like number of very, very interesting things that were happening. So I wanted to capture that, and I felt, very strongly about publishing it much later. And actually, just a part. The publisher, the original publisher from Jagriti Prakashani, he was one of, he was actually, I don't know how to say it. Well, he was hacked to death in broad daylight because he had published an atheist writer.
My God.
So his wife is now, running this publishing house. So there were a number of incidents that kept on happening, and that's the time where I felt that, this book should be out, because it documents a particular time and particular place that doesn't exist anymore. Of course the place is there, but it just doesn't exist anymore. So that was my, I wrote it, and I kind of kept, became busy with my academic life. And then after a few years, then I was serious, and then it got published. So when I was thinking, which part to read, so I'll just in accordance with the theme, with especially with Chapona's book, I'll read here a little, a few passages where I, go back and I, talk about the domestic helps who used to live in our house. So I'll read from that part. The person to whom I owe immense gratitude for teaching me about periods, sex, and childbirth without any confusion was Shorupa, the young girl who worked for us. Her name was really Sharifa, but she changed it to Shorupa. Dark and always smiling, she used to tell me wonderful stories of her 3 sisters. One who was abducted by a dacoit and had to marry him. One who was beautiful and had to be hidden to make sure no marriage proposal came for her before her elder sisters. And the one who was going to school and facing insurmountable obstacles. Her village near Manikganj, less than 100 miles from Dhaka, seemed to be in another world. I pleaded with her in the quiet afternoons while my parents were taking a nap to resolve the confusing issues of sex, love, and relationships, and she obliged, sharing stories of her own affair with a helper at a street stall who made dal puri. My sister and I also demanded normal stories from her every night, and in the half-dark room, lit only by the illumination on the balcony, her yellow and blue translucent sari glowing, she took us to another dimension. I don't know the proportion of truth and exaggeration and pure fantasy in her stories, but I do know that her power of imagination served me and my sister well. All of the young girls who worked at our house, often for a couple of years, had been denied the opportunity to go to school. We started teaching them enthusiastically, but the excitement on both sides faded after they learned to sign their names, and often they left to get married. Komula, the girl who stayed at our place the longest, more than 12 years, had just finished learning to write her name when her mother asked us to teach her Arabic. My mother took over, but those sessions did not go far, as both my mother and Komula preferred taking naps in the afternoon and watching television over reciting Alif Ba Ta Sa. Komula was not too enthusiastic about Bengali and even slower in Arabic, but she could sing any tune she heard. Her lifelong wish was to own a radio, but when granted this wish by my uncles, she moved on to a cassette player and used to take care of it like a baby. Now she's married with her own two daughters, Sonia and Tanya, who are going to school. Kamala has had a stable and secure life, but all her desires for music, movies, and other enjoyments have had to be relegated to the background. Countless girls and women have worked at our place over the years. We, or at least I, never thought twice about ordering them around. My mom had a reputation of providing well for the maids, better than the average household, and somehow this justified our demands of asking them to bring us a book or a glass of water any time of the day or night. My mother gave Kamala time off one afternoon each week until late evening, much to the annoyance of our neighbors, as this set a bad example. My father asked us and the maids for a glass of water, standing right in front of the water pitcher and the glass. My mother scolded Kamala as liberally as she scolded us. With Kamala, because of her long presence, issues assumed a twisted longevity. She had been married at a very young age, barely 13, and her mother sold off their small parcel of land to give the money to her husband to start a shop, with which he promptly disappeared within a month of marriage, never to be heard from again. We were all sympathetic toward her quest to find a husband the second time around, but dealing with her pent-up frustration and fits of outbursts was not easy on any of us. A number of young men, chauffeurs, guards, brothers-in-law of other maids, tried to woo fair Kamala, who had a way with words, but all backed off from proposing marriage. The stigma of getting married to a girl who worked as a maid, that to a divorced woman, was too strong, though Kamala was sought after for flirting and dates. Kamala was not looking for dates. All she craved was a respectable marriage, but her quest landed her in a quandary, whether to trust a person enough to get involved and shun the other suitors, or to go on looking for a husband. The situation was made more chaotic by the fact that each of these suitors promised marriage, but none followed through. I remember hearing her stories of betrayal and secretly being grateful for my class privileges. I also remember Hasina, dark and buck-toothed, with a pleasant smile, who worked at my nanny's house, who told me the story of her divorce, her policeman husband turning vicious as soon as he put on his uniform, and becoming very loving when he took it off. She kept insisting it was the uniform he used to change as soon as he wore it. There was Saleha, our cook from Faridpur, who used to smoke bidi, a cheaper version of local handmade cigarette, much to our surprise and my mother's disapproval. But no one was like Shorupa. I don't remember if she was with us for a long time or not. She continued visiting us even after she no longer worked for us. She made us pitha, a sweet cake-like dessert, and I particularly remember the one that involved leaves from the jackfruit tree. There was a semi-liquid concoction of flour and sugar with which she drew designs on the leaves. When it thickened, the leaves were placed in a sieve over a pot of boiling water, and the steam separated the pita from the leaves. I had forgotten all about this until a few years ago. At a traditional Mexican cookout, the making of tamales made me remember those occasions when I was given the duty to clean the leaves from the jackfruit tree and lightly brush them with oil. Shorupa and Saleha made achar or pickle, competing with each other and goading us. Which one is better? You have to tell us the truth. We complied depending on whom we liked more at that time, reserving the right to swiftly change our minds. Now I am amazed at how these women, who all had histories of misfortune which purged them from their villages and made them to come to work at the homes of strangers, held on to their humor, self-respect, and conviction, knowing the stark options staring at them. Shorupa indeed had a tragic end to her life. She had stopped working for us when I was around 10 and later became the caretaker of my ailing Nani's grandmother. After my Nani died, she worked somewhere else but visited us every now and then. She showed up one day when I was around 17, wanting to stay for the night and crying a lot. No amount of urging and coaxing from me or my mother would convince her to divulge her secret sorrows. She used to keep her savings in my mother's safekeeping, and she wanted the money back. She went to her village only to come back within a couple of weeks, claiming to be very sick. We took her to a doctor and discovered that she had become dangerously anemic. She had no explanation of her deterioration in just a few weeks. She fainted the next day, and in the hospital it was revealed that she was suffering from a botched abortion. The doctors needed more information, which she steadfastly refused to provide, denying the abortion all the time. She needed blood, which she got, but her infection had spread, and after 2 weeks in the hospital, she was given medication with a dire prognosis of suffering for the rest of her life. She did not suffer much, as she died within a week of her release in her village home. What is ironic is that safe and cheap abortion was and still remains accessible to girls and women almost everywhere in Bangladesh. Shorupa was deterred from getting proper aid not because of the lack of access, but because of her sense of social shame. I remember her tears, my helplessness, and her obstinate stance with the doctors all too well, but mostly I remember her laughter, my badgering regarding information about sex, and her whispering back invaluable information after extracting multiple promises never to tell my mother. She was 10 to 12 years older than me and filled my yearning for an elder sister or an unavailable cousin. When I reflect now, I'm both astonished and grateful at how she explained a male-female relationship and childbirth with such candor and accuracy, careful to use a language fit for a 9 or 10-year-old to easily understand and digest. In a twist of poetic justice, it is very difficult to find maids in Dhaka these days, as they prefer to work in the garment industry, working harder but earning more and enjoying more freedom than being at someone's beck and call for 24 hours a day. Mukta, the very young girl who stays at our house now, forced to be a maid after her parents' divorce and her relatives could not offer a place safe enough for a 14-year-old, had studied up to class 4. Now she has the opportunity to continue her studies in return for her labor. Although her level of education at the village school was quite weak, she still caught up with the public school standard. If this anecdotal example is a reflection of changes in academic standard, then in itself is revolutionary. I suspect exposure through television, movies, and technology has played a pivotal role in bringing Mukta on the same page as her peers, going to better schools and growing up in better socioeconomic conditions. I'll stop here.
So